It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we have a repeat guest. Ben Moss is on. And we're going to be talking, this show in particular is not going to be all rainbows and unicorns. We're going to be talking, what is the saying, drain the swamp? We're going to be talking about the negative things in ufology today. And I hope that, by the end of the show we can say some positive things and come up with some ideas in the future that will help as we move forward. I've been doing the show now. It's coming up in 6 years. I can't believe it. And I still don't know anything more than I knew when I started. I was criticized for that recently, and that's okay, because I don't pretend to know anything. I'm just here exploring, basically. So we have Alejandro Rojas will be coming back next week. He is on the plane now, flying home from Budapest. I don't know if any of you follow him on Facebook, but he was posting some awesome pictures, and it'll be good to have him back in town. So our guest, Ben Moss, like I said, he's been on with Tony Angiola a number of times, and he's Mufon's chief field investigator in Virginia, and he's also part of the Strike Team Area Research or STAR Team, and he's been on History Channel's Hangar One and a lot of other shows, Paranormal TV and on and on. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
I should say welcome back to the show.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about, some of the issues that are happening in the UFO field in general. And I know there was, you wanted to get some things off of your chest. You wanted to talk about it a little bit as well. But for the person that's not familiar with you, that hadn't seen you on before, can you give a little bit of your background and what got you interested in the topic to begin with?
My dad was interested in UFOs, and when I was a little kid, I remember climbing up on the bed and watching the Walter Cronkite special about UFOs. It was kind of a skeptical show, and we did post that on our Mufon VA website, but that got me going, and then I was pretty much hooked from that point forward to the point where all the kids in the neighborhood were throwing frisbees up, taking pictures of it, and claiming we saw a flying saucer.
So, how did you get involved in all the investigating and all that and MUFON? What started that course?
That was in the 90s. I joined MUFON and went to a conference, and then I got interested in becoming an investigator. And in 1999, I actually ran the security for the one at Crystal City. That was really well attended. I think 700 or 800 people were there. And then, after doing, about 40 or 50 investigations, Sue Switek, our state director, promoted me to chief field investigator. And I've been disseminating and working cases ever since. The more I've done, the more I've gotten into it, and it's just escalated from there with everything that's been happening in the last 2 or 3 years. Getting on the show, Hangar One, was a boost because more people just talk to me because they recognize me. So it's one of those things that the more you do, the more people you meet, the more people that want to talk to you, and it just snowballs from there.
Now, Hangar One had a little bit of controversy too. People were in the UFO field were saying, it's not so good or exaggerated. What did you think in general of the show? Or can you set yourself aside and look at it, or is it just a biased opinion, the only way you can go about something like that?
Well, I remember the kind of the Blue Book show that was on in the past, and the one with Robert Stack, and it was less fanfare and more following cases that MUFON actually investigated. So I think when you take a lot of the wow out of the shows and have this really slick presentation, that's what people are used to, and there are other shows that do it that way. The History Channel show was pretty accurate. There was a little bit of embellishment here and there, but I thought they did a good job with the stories. We just had several of us just didn't like the one about the Mars tale. That's a whole other story. But taking the cases that they picked, and those were selected by Jeremy Ray, and some other people kind of helped with that. But they picked really good cases. I thought they did a good job. They didn't change what really happened in the case because they're so unusual to begin with. You don't have to add special effects and all these aftermarket things to make this thing look better. The stories are pretty fascinating as they are, but I thought they did a good job. I mean, there were certain topics that we got on. They were a little bit out there, but the cases were pretty well represented. So, and I'm trying not to be biased about it, but if I wasn't on the show, I still would have watched the show. I watch almost all the UFO shows, the good ones and the bad ones, and you can learn something from all of them. Right.
Now, okay, that MUFON's been, under scrutiny over the last year, and all the way from the guests at their last symposium kind of being out there a bit or a bit fringy to the issue with John Ventry. I figured we could just talk about it all tonight, get it all off our chest and see if we still have a show by next week.
Well, that when John Ventry posted that I guess you would call it a rant. I actually called him up and told him, because I know John. I told him, I said, you should probably think about stepping down because that's where everything's going to lead to eventually. And then MUFON had kind of a halfway response, and then kind of got backlash. Social media is funny because they'll jump on anything, to get the ball rolling. But there were some things said that most people wouldn't agree with because they were fairly inflammatory and racist, and so it's just one of those things where guilt by association, and Jan maybe could have done a better job of just jumping on it right away, because when I talked to John before he actually got let go completely, I said, this is going to end with you leaving your position one way or another. So it was just one of those things that a lot of people were waiting to jump on MUFON, and that was a good catalyst. But in the last symposium that I was at in Las Vegas, there were some topics that, it's like I've said before, if you had a symposium of scientific data and white papers, you'd probably have about 50 attendees, and they'd all be scientists. If you have a show about, trips to Mars with Ross Perot and going back in time and time regression and dinosaurs on Mars, then you're going to have 700 or 800 people show up, which is exactly what happened. Go ahead. The one thing I wanted to add to that was just my observation, because I was talking to a lot of people, but, you got a lot of people that criticize MUFON from the computer screen, and, everybody's, very brave behind a computer screen, but there's so many people that come to this conference from far away, from other countries, that are in walkers and wheelchairs and respirators. And, if some of the people that criticize MUFON would just get out and maybe come to one of the symposiums and meet some people, you might have a bigger picture, a bigger understanding of all the people involved in that. So, it's easy to jump on something if you're not involved in it. You don't know the inner workings of it. It's another thing if you're part of it and you can see all the different clashes going on and what's going on behind the scenes. But, kudos to people that make it there that probably haven't left their house in a year. I mean, the average age at a conference is certainly over 45. Yeah. And, it's just tough. It's easy to throw out barbs from a computer screen, but, do something about it.
I like Jan Harzen, and I don't know if you caught Kevin Randall's interview with him, but he asked him, some pretty strong questions, about the people that donate the $5,000 or more that get into the inner circle, and what type of information they get. I thought that was interesting. I had no idea about that part of it.
Yeah. I did hear that, and it was, it was interesting, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I think I might also get my rants over with.
Let's hear it.
Okay, and I got to tell you, every time I rail against Dr. Stephen Greer, I lose support. I lose supporters. I get nasty emails from some people. I understand why people are attracted to his charisma, and he seems, in general, he seems like a nice guy. And I'm going to say some positive things as well as the things that really upset me about what he has been doing. And, the last two movies, Sirius and Unacknowledged. I don't know if you caught that. Did you happen to catch that? You did.
Yeah, I've seen it.
The Sirius one I thought was a total ego thing, basically the bottom line is the Atacama, as I call it, the baby alien there, ended up, with human DNA.
Right.
So if you watched Unacknowledged, then you'll see that in this show he also talks about that. Let's see, I have a quote here. I wrote the quote down, and basically that, of course, the alien, body is most likely not human. So he's still hanging on to that. And I think I liken him a little bit to a cult leader because he has these very, very strong followers that will attack you if you say anything negative about him. And I really would have to say that he's probably one of the biggest charlatans of our time in the UFO field. And I think he's in it only for the money. It's kind of like a rock star. It takes a while to get to the very top, and you make a lot of money. In the UFO field, there's hardly any money made by anybody. But if you're at the very top, you can make some money.
Right.
And the way you make money is not necessarily through fame of, say, television shows or movies or anything like that, but a lot
Certainly
of times
not that way.
donations. His website is totally set up for donations. I have to say, Unacknowledged was very well done. It was nice music, absolutely fantastic editing, some great UFO clips. I really thought he did have. There was a couple in there that have been proven wrong, hoaxes and things. But for the most part, the clips that he had in there were really good video clips of UFOs, I thought. Okay, so here's a couple things. It really baffled me that Richard Doty in the Paul Benowitz case was talking about aliens and about, the ones that he saw and things like that. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how much you know about Richard Doty, but I was kind of shocked to hear him talk about that. What did you think of that?
Yeah, Doty has that terrible history with Linda Moulton Howe and Paul Benowitz, and it's just, you never know what's the truth and what's made up and what's conjecture and what's, because I know Dr. Greer has been caught with that dinner table talk about some type of revelation when the guy said he was just being cordial. So, I don't believe I've met Stephen Greer, and I never try to talk about somebody's character that I haven't met. But, like we said before, a red flag to me is if you're generating income by, taking people out on trips to see things. You've got to produce. And so if you're in this for money, there's something you have to keep doing to produce money. And it's dangling that carrot right in front of you, just out of reach. So you never really catch it because there's no carrot. So the whole thing is that I think the best thing he ever did was definitely when all the people came together at the press club in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
That was a great presentation. That's a great way to do things. But everything else around it just has, is a big red flag to me. Richard Doty, definitely was lying about a lot of things, admitted he was lying, to send people down the rabbit hole. I just think there's a lot of misdirection here, but underlying it all, there's there's not anything of substance. If you have proof that you're calling down UFOs, where are the videos? Where's the electromagnetic readings? Where's the gravitometer, the magnetometer, the daylight? All of that. It's just not there. And this constant need for donations and things. If it's about the money, you're going to find ways to get money. And it's probably not the way to investigate UFOs, because UFOs take you where they want to take you. You can't pigeonhole them and then, command them to come down, command them to be in a certain spot at a certain time. So I just, it just leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth.
Well, he was charging people, I forget what the fee was, at one of those, sighting, whatever they called, sighting, sky watches. He was charging them so much a piece to take a picture in this UFO that nobody could see. I don't know if you heard about that or not.
Yeah.
So one of the parts in the movie, he starts sobbing, and I'm a guy, and, I can sob too. I understand that. But I think it was theatrical, and basically it was about his coming of age as a young doctor and it being briefed by the CIA director, that's Woolsey, who again he never spoke. No one thinks he really had meetings with him. But he started sobbing about that because he had to. According to him, the president and the CIA director were being lied to, and they came to him, and that's what he was sobbing about, is they came to him so he could help them. Right. And then also he said that there's a bullet in this room with everyone's name on it, and if what you say here goes out of this room, that bullet will find you. That type of thing. I think and people are buying into it. It's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of upsetting. I think it hurts the UFO field. And then he gets into the free energy part. He has this thing called the New Earth Incubator. He has a funding project on his website. He needs to raise $100 to $200 million, and you're welcome to donate as much as you possibly can. So,
well, that's just, if anybody had a free energy device, you would patent it, you would go public, you would make the money without needing to ask for it. Or on the other end, the big oil would have you rubbed out or something. But I just don't see it. It's just like with a lot of the claims of people that are really outlandish. If you cannot prove something and your only source of verification is everybody else saying the same thing, then you don't have any verification.
Yeah, that's right. And also, I got a call from Lee Spiegel. He had a pre-screening of the movie several months ago, and he called me and said the thing that upset him the most is 2 times in the movie they say that J. Allen Hynek was heading Project Blue Book. That really upset him for some reason.
Well, that's a big flaw.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't caught. But anyway, so that's all I have to say. Like I said, I understand why people have the attraction to Stephen Greer. He seems really honest, and like you said, I really do commend him for the way he started. It's just too bad. I think he took a fork in the road because that was a really big deal. The thing he did back in what year was that? Do you remember? It was going way back.
Was it 99? Somewhere around there, maybe 2000. I was there. I just can't remember.
Oh wow!
I was there. I was standing in the back.
Yeah.
But I mean, if the goal is to uncover the mystery of what UFOs are, that's one thing. If the goal is to make an income and generate, a salary each year, then that's just not going to work. The two don't go together.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have. It's like, I know you feel the same way as I do. I do this for a passion. I don't do it for. Obviously, I don't do it for money. That's not what I'm looking for. Otherwise, I would have quit a long time ago when the cost started rising on my, my server and stuff like that. Someone brought up Meier. Billy Meier. That's another. There was a Billy Meier UFO shot. It was one of the clips in Greer's movie, which I was kind of surprised.
Right.
most of those are hoaxes. I get contacted by Michael Horn. Is it Michael
Right.
Horn?
Yeah.
Several times a year wanting to be on my show, and I don't know, I just can't have him on the show. So we get into it each time, and I just say, look, I'm not going to argue with you. I don't trust anything that Billy Meier, maybe Billy Meier did have some sightings at one time, possibly, but, so many of the things are proven hoaxes. And it's another thing where the government comes in, and changes things according to them.
Right. Yeah. Billy Meier is another person that found an avenue towards making money. And almost every decent photo that I've seen has been broken down to show models and, tape coming off of some of the motherships and, things that people have pointed out, and a lot of people have even better knowledge about. But it's kind of like the Dan Fry and a lot of these guys back in the day. I haven't seen anything real that Billy Meier, and that's probably going to upset a lot of people. But when you really do the homework and dig into it, there's so much. An example is the one thing I remember clearly was a UFO that goes around a tree in his field. And this guy goes out there and says, there's no tree there, and that's when we found out that he was growing these little Japanese trees and probably inserted that into the video and with a small model made it look like a giant oak tree or something. So
that's right. Yeah.
You shoot yourself in the foot once and your credibility is down the tubes pretty quickly. Yeah, at least with most people that do their homework.
Well, if any part of something is faked, then the credibility of the whole situation. I'm a fine arts appraiser, and that's how I have to look at something. Unfortunately, and what I do is guilty till proven innocent instead of the other way around. So if you see like a house that has one fake in it, then you really have to be careful and with everything you're appraising. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel about things like the MJ12 documents, for instance.
Yeah.
I know Stan Friedman. I have a lot of respect for Stan Friedman. Really like him a lot. But I know he believes that there are a few that are correct. And to me, it could be a campaign of disinformation to mix them in and have people not believe in it. I can understand that could possibly happen, but I question those. What do you think about the whole MJ12 situation?
It's probably sandwiched around some type of real document, but I've looked at these extensively. The first red flag is anonymous mail sent to Jamie Shandera. So you have an anonymous source. You can't verify anything from that source. Then you have some flaws in the documents. That one with the Harry Truman signature looks like a precise copy from a real document. And, is it magic? Is it MJ12? I mean, when you kind of dig back into that, there's a lot of problems. I know that Stanton has addressed some of the issues with fonts and things like that, but I think it's probably disinformation built around some truth, like legends, or have a little bit of basis of truth. But look at the rabbit hole it sent a lot of people down. Look at the time and resources to investigate that. If it is kind of made up around maybe some real document, they did their job. They took people off the path, and they've spent 20 years analyzing these things because they came out in, 89?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
If it is fake, look at all the wasted time and money and documents and presentations. And, it's just crazy.
Well, think of the time that Stan himself has in that, these trips to Washington. Luckily someone funded him for doing that, but just the time involved, and I'm sure he enjoyed it too, but still, that was really something.
And he likes digging through the archives.
Right. I had mentioned to him on my show that I had. At an auction house, a former CIA agent retired. His estate was there, and I found MJ12 documents in his footlocker. Or I didn't, the auctioneer did. But, there are copies, the same copies that are floating all around, and who knows why he had them, but I don't think it's anything serious,
right.
Yeah. So just before we keep our rants going here, I'm going to ask you a question or two that came in
Sure.
for you. In your opinion, do you think, this is actually from Carrie in the forum, and do you think that Bob Bigelow has been given any information from the government as a precursor to finding out the truth, especially with the money he has spent on investigating this topic?
Well, Bob Bigelow, he did have access to some of the close cases at MUFON, and he paid for that access. But he, I believe, from my understanding, and he's a smart guy, I had given him kudos for coming out with what he said on national news about alien presence, but he was looking for propulsion evidence, pretty much so, because he wants to put hotels in space and do a lot of things like Elon Musk is doing, where space is the next frontier. So if by studying some of these really good evidential MUFON cases, you can learn something about the propulsion, which is what all has been trying to do, especially recently, that is the reason why he dug into it. My understanding was, if he could get some material, he could understand what these things are made of, how they're withstanding the pressures of space. If he could figure out some of the propulsion characteristics of how, if something 2 miles wide or long is sitting in the atmosphere, the amount of energy required to keep it in one place is just amazing. So, I think he was trying to get an inside look at what he could do to help with his programs in space. And he might have gotten some data. I don't know. A lot of what he did is kind of not out in the public right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you want... I know you had some other topics you wanted to talk about, but I can go into... I only have 2 rants to make. Not really. I have a few more, but still, I don't have too much. But I remember when we initially put this show together, you said you wanted to, get some things off your chest. So
yeah, a lot of the social media attacks, and people have attacked me, and that's fine. I don't mind. But this whole thing about the scientific study of UFOs, which MUFON is kind of steered away from a little bit. There's a point there, and there's a point for both sides. But there's so many videos and things that pop up online, and I'll go in and say, CGI or fake inserted image, and I'll just get hammered. How do you know that? You're just. It's got to be a MUFON case for you to agree with it. I'm like, no. The key thing for a lot of these things that are being posted online is there any evidence of anomalous movement or propulsion? And just like the Chilean video that was found to be an airplane that was so far away it just wasn't showing up on the radar, and it was hitting a condensation level of 30,000 feet and was shooting the plume out the back, which in infrared was black and looked weird, but that was not anomalous at all. It was an airplane. It was flying in a straight line. It had a plume come out, and people didn't realize it was being filmed in infrared, so they thought, wow, that's ejecting material. It's some type of exotic craft. So one of my big rants that I try not to go into too deeply is the fact that people will see a video and then repost it on Facebook or wherever and say it's the greatest UFO video ever when it shows none of the characteristics of things we look for. And it goes down the line of a lot of things out in the public now, the Nazca mummies and the 3-fingered alien and all these things that have no backing, no scientific background to them. It's kind of gotten the one thing social media has done is you can take a subject and run with it in such a direction that it's like flat earthers. I just can't believe that people think the Earth is still flat. It's just amazing to me some of the things that are posted. So one thing that I'm trying to get to in my rant here is that if people do a little bit more homework, they would understand what the difference is between what we're looking for and all the fakes and the sites like Secure Team 6 or Secure Team 10, which, you got to pay to watch these videos, which are probably created by people just for that show and there's nothing real about them. So you have to kind of have a discerning eye, especially in the media. We've always had to have that, but in social media also.
Right. Yeah. Social media is a whole different animal. It adds a whole different thing to this. And, there is a want to believe, I think, in a lot of this. I totally get that. And like my son says, if aliens didn't exist, it would be a lot more boring, or the possibility of them not existing. and so I get all that, but once things start rolling, they're on like a freight train. It can't almost unstoppable. Once something is bought into, and people are just looking at the surface, and it's what happens though in situations like this is if someone is thinking about really looking into the topic and excited about it, and they right off the bat find out the first thing they really thought was real. Like I remember years ago watching the alien autopsy and thinking, "Oh my God, what is that?"
Yep.
But so many people get burned. They get burned by the experience once they realize that it was a hoax, and then they no longer want anything to do with the topic. When there's some perfectly good information and real hard work out there.
Yeah, and for some people, they just can't let go of something that's been proven to not be true. It's sad because it's like the Billy Meier and people like that, where you can pretty much show that there's a lot of hoaxing going on. It's hard for people to let go of something they believed in. I've had some things where I thought were really great cases and true, and then I found out otherwise, and I'm like, oh gosh, how did I get fooled? So, one of the lessons is be careful what you say, especially on social media, because it's permanent. It's out there forever. It can be witnessed by 7 billion people. So with a lot of these things, it's best to do your due diligence, your homework, and kind of get an idea of what makes something anomalous and unusual and a UFO, and what is a fake CGI, man-made, atmospheric phenomena or weather-related. Because just as an example, when we had Jupiter and Saturn really close in the sky a couple of years ago, and I went out and looked at it, it looked really weird, but I knew the configuration was there. We got about 10, 15 UFO reports about that. And, it looked like they were dancing in the sky. But if you realize that as two planets were close together, you have that diffraction of the atmosphere where stars look like they twinkle because of all the stuff you're looking through. It looked really strange, but if you knew that event was happening, you'd realize, hey, that's really cool looking, but that's Jupiter and Saturn. So it's one of those things where, like I've said before, you have to kind of know a little bit about many different sciences to really look at this with kind of a trained eye, I would guess, and look at it so that you're not fooled. Know a little bit about meteorology, a little bit about astronomy, a little bit about what's in the sky where. Use some of the apps on your phone. Those are all things that will help you. It's like a case we went on once where the woman said she saw UFOs constantly over her house, and when we were there, I was using my Flight Trader app. I'm like, that's a flight out of Dulles. No, that's a flight going to Chicago, and every single thing she thought was a UFO was a flight. So. I guess it's easy to be fooled because of so many shows now that talk about UFOs, fiction and reality shows, that I think some of the old great works in ufology are not being seen by this new generation that's coming up. Some of the greatest books, that really got into it and did a good job of talking about it and explaining things and looking at cases and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I titled this show The Elephant in the Ufologist's Living Room or something along those lines. And so, I thought we could touch on some controversial subjects that no one would really want to talk about. And one of those things is the Stan Romanek child pornography case. I don't know if anyone followed that or not, but that did, he did one count. Was acquitted. He was acquitted of one account, but not. He was also, found guilty on not dispersing but owning, child pornography, which, that's attacking him as a character. Me talking about perhaps, but they said that they wanted to bring ufology into the courtroom, and the reason they wanted to do that. Now, obviously, I didn't hear anything about it. I guess the lawyer was smart enough to say, don't go there. But they were going to accuse the government of coming in, and because of Stan's knowledge of all these beings and things like that, the government planted the child porn on his, on his computer. so that's the part that I'm upset about, is that, what type of information does he think he has that he's not been able to prove to the world, that the government would actually do something like that to discredit him? That's kind of the thought I have on that. And I also communicated with Lisa Romanek. I just said, I hope you're doing okay, and I hope that I hope you get help, because I know denial is a really, a strong coping mechanism. Yep. And so I received some, total denial response back to that. Quite a few. She wrote me several times. But just saying that he's 100% innocent, that's... So, I basically ended my conversation with her. If you're sitting alone and deep in your thoughts, you feel he's innocent, then maybe you're right.
Right.
So what else can you say?
I was looking at that for years now. I was always interested in what he was filming and all, but there's two sides of that. Either he loaded that on his computer or was put on his computer. If one or the other is true, then you have two different conversations. If he was onto something, which I don't know if he was, and they planted it on there, well, wow, what a way to ruin somebody's life. If he had it on there, that he put it on there himself, I mean, why would you, if you're having this kind of scrutiny going on because you're investigating things that maybe somebody doesn't want you to investigate, why in the world would you have something like that on your computer? And I think it was found in the closet of his house. The whole thing just sounds really strange. Not knowing or being able to get to the truth of the matter, I don't know Stan, so I can't say that he's this person he's being portrayed in the media. It just seems very convenient that they found all this material, and that somebody that seems as smart as he is would have that sitting on a computer, because it's crazy. It's just, I don't understand the whole thing about that. But it's something that I couldn't really say one way or another, because I don't know. If they planted on his computer, then we're all wrong, and if they didn't, then what a shame, what a terrible thing. Either way, it is a tragedy.
Yes.
Either scenario is terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know the guy, so I can't tell you that, oh, yeah, he did it. That wouldn't be fair.
Well, 3 years ahead of that, of them, arresting him initially, they had seen the activity going on, but they didn't have anything in place to move forward with it. They didn't have a cyber porn, investigation team or anything like that. But they knew the activity was going on, several years ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I just wouldn't. Yeah, I would hate to conjecture something that's not true, not correct, or or I'm totally wrong about it. It's not fair to that person. They're going through their own little hell right now.
How I feel about that, I'm sure it is hell. He's not going to spend any jail time on it, but how I feel about that is, he had choices, and also when he went to court, he had 12 peers that were in the jury box that found him guilty. So it's how our court systems work. But I don't think there's any big conspiracy about it myself. But I will say this: because of the following that Stan has, he has so much support. Him and Lisa as well. They have all these people are just pouring out their support to them, and all believing that he was framed.
I mean, the 12 jury, we have the OJ trial, so I'm not sure if that means they were accurate. So
yeah,
I just, it's just without knowing that, he could be a really good guy that's been screwed somehow, or somebody else could have done that. I don't know, but there's nothing I can really say about that, because unless you're him or your close friend, you don't know what the whole scenario was. And that's kind of scary, because there have been a high incidence of UFO researchers passing away. Hopefully that's just a coincidence and not something, but you just never know. I don't think that any of us can get close enough to any material that would make them want to do something drastic like that. I mean, sure, you might film a black project that's not where it's supposed to be, which I think has happened with some of these triangular craft, and then you get a little grief about that. But other than that, I don't see, unless something lands in your yard that's extraterrestrial, I don't see how you're going to get a hold of any information without hacking something. Just in regular investigations, that's going to cause a three-letter agency to come down on you. I've always said that, as a member of MUFON, as investigator, we're all on the list somewhere. They know who we are, I'm sure, but I don't think we're a threat to uncover a free energy device or anything like that.
Well, Dr. Stephen Greer does have bodyguards, so.
And he's developed a flux capacitor. So.
That's what it is.
Just put a little, trash in there, and it'll fire up and power your house.
In his movie Unacknowledged, he has this. I remember when this came out, the guy was powering his car with water. Do you remember that? And whatever happened? I remember this is not a UFO topic, but whatever happened to that?
75 mile an hour 75 miles per gallon carburetor guy that disappeared. I mean, there have been people that have developed supposedly engines that run very efficiently, and then you don't hear from them again. The one on water, I know that when right before the Segway came out, that people were wondering if that was a flying device. When that patent finally came out, it was actually just something you rode around on. But it's conspiracy theories. I don't know I think if something would run on water, it'd have to convert it somehow into something else and then back again. But there's so many good scientists out there. I think somebody would have stumbled on that again if somebody had perfected it once. But I haven't seen any evidence of that.
Right. Another question in the forum is from Carrie is, as part of your investigative role in MUFON, have you ever seen evidence from a witness or via a scientific source that for one reason or another has not been disclosed to the public, but has convinced you of something otherworldly?
Oh, yeah, we both have seen that. I would say that our buddy, Mr. Stanford, has strong evidence of that. Yeah. Some of the things that Ray has shared and he shared with others definitely show technology in our atmosphere that I don't think came from this world. I'm not one to jump on the bandwagon and immediately say if it's not from here, it's ET. It could be a lot of other possibilities, but that would make sense. It's just like if we find there was life on Mars or Europa or anywhere else in our solar system, then mathematically life is everywhere. Then the possibility that something might be monitoring us because we're about to travel space and we're warlike could be possible. We could have people or civilizations visiting us because they want to keep an eye on us because we're starting to travel space and we have atomic bombs. We kill each other. But a lot of what Ray Stanford has shown me and Tony and we've seen very fascinating things. There's other evidence I've seen. We're doing our talk at Mysteries of Space and Sky about propulsion, and when you do a talk about UFO propulsion, it's all speculation and what you can gather from the available data. But even with the eclipse in '91 in Mexico, with that silver disc that was filmed by I think 8 or 9 different people, it wasn't the planet Venus, but it did show a purple plasma flowing behind it as it moved through space, and that I've seen that in many other videos that I think are real anomalous objects. So personally, I've seen several videos and even photographs that I think are showing a non-terrestrial technology, and our conclusion on the Socorro case that we're still working on is that thing wasn't built by anyone on this planet because nobody has come forward and answered the White House, the Pentagon, the CIA, and Blue Book to say, yeah, we built that, we flew it. That never happened. So when you eliminate all the possibilities, you get to that point where you have to accept the only remaining answer. And for Socorro, it was that we can't find any evidence that anybody built that thing or that that technology even exists today. So it was probably a non-terrestrial craft that landed at Lonnie's and Warsaw.
Yes, I know you're in touch with Ray a lot, and I hear from him. Oh, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a month. So I'm hoping that he's digging and keeps digging till he finds the original negative of that image of the craft when he took a shot, over at the dynamite shack.
Yeah, it's a fascinating picture. I think he's looking hard, and just like I told Ray, I don't think anybody grabbed it. I think that only Ray knows where things are in Ray's house, and it's just he's probably put it somewhere where he hadn't found it yet. But yeah, that's something that's interesting because when James Fox told me he had visited in Socorro, and there were apparently Lonnie Zamora had been sent pictures of that craft that other people had taken, but all the pictures were missing. So that's another part of the aspect of the investigation is we're still trying to find somebody else that might have taken a photograph of a craft like that, because we did find about 8 or 9 points from that Highway 60 West, which we traveled from from Socorro to Scottsdale when we saw you last at the UFO Congress in Arizona. There were about 8 or 9 places where that craft was sighted. Apparently there was a landing at Hollerman. There was another landing in Socorro. So out of those 8 touches where that thing was seen and possibly photographed, hopefully there's another photograph out there somewhere so we can do some cross-referencing on that.
Right. Speaking of the Phoenix conference we were both at, I believe that was the year where they had the hybrids, right?
That was Jacques Vallée was there, right? Or was that the year after?
I think so. Anyway.
In 2013, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, when we're talking about the hybrids, I do have to say that you talked about earlier, if it was all science, nobody would be there, 15 people would be there. Well, these people that were claiming to be hybrids, they showed up, and they showed drawings of their alien selves, not pictures, but drawings. And it was kind of, sort of comical in a way to watch this. And, there was some tears shed, but I'll tell you, they got a standing ovation. It was the most fringe topic of the conference, and they got a standing ovation. So it kind of goes to show what people want. I think that's what it is.
Some people want to believe so badly. I remember that I had a person, I won't give more detail on that, but came up to me in Arizona and grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me and was going, "You have to believe that I've been abducted." And was totally, crying and about an inch from my face. And I was like, I had to finally say, and Tony, passed this person off to me as they went to him first. So thanks, Tony. But anyway, I said, I believe that you believe that happened, so, I'd give you a little bit of, relax a little bit. I believe that you believe that happened, but, the almost fanaticism of some people, it's like the theory that they're going to be here to save us, that's just, and you just can't buy into that. It's a phenomenon that's happening. We're investigating it, but, when it comes to hybrids and, abduction, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around, but it could be happening. It's just very hard to prove. It's like a lot of things. You have some really good stories, some very interesting stories, but they're still stories. Usually you don't have any physical evidence. You don't have a neighbor that saw it. Sometimes you do, but it's tough to get just trying to figure out what UFOs are. I try not to branch off into all the other things that are going on because it's too distracting, and it's less and less evidence the further you get away from just trying to figure out what's flying around the sky. So I try to focus on that. But when it comes to a lot of the the spiritual side of it, the Palladians and the reptilians and all of that, I don't buy into that. I really don't.
Well, I was on the fence. There are some cases that I think are very convincing, but I was on the fence about, abductions in general. At first, at first I didn't think it was happening at all. And then I thought, well, if UFOs are here and if it's a possibility that at least some of them are extraterrestrial, I could see that something could be happening, or at least they'd be, doing some research while they're here. They wouldn't just fly over and fly back, I don't think, unless that's the way they wanted to observe. But I think that it's possible that something's happening, but and that some things have happened to some people,
Yeah. That being said, I mean, I know Travis Walton. I've talked to him several times. I've talked to him personally, and I believe his story. I mean, I think that something extraordinary happened there. All the people, even the guys that were with him that didn't want to talk, have all come forward. They've all corroborated everybody's story. And it's very interesting because, these guys were all up for murder for about 4 or 5 days because they thought they'd killed Travis.
Yeah.
Everything about that story is backed up by evidence. And even in the great movie that Jennifer Stein did called Travis, the fact that the tree rings facing the event where that, I guess it was some type of radioactivity where the ship came down and zapped Travis, that the tree rings are growing more in towards that event, and the only parallel study that they could find that showed the same thing was in Chernobyl. The tree rings accelerated towards radiation. So there are cases like that. Betty and Barney Hill, not sure about that. That seems pretty fascinating too. So there are, like you said, there are some cases that make you go, wow. And it's just like this whole phenomenon. You get some of these cases, if they're true, they're so strange that it kind of makes sense that if there is an advanced civilization visiting us, like I think Carl Sagan or maybe Arthur C. Clarke said, it would look like magic. And that's exactly what some of these cases you're like, what the heck? It just sounds so strange, but it kind of makes sense that it would sound strange because it's alien, or at least it's non-terrestrial. So it's a conundrum.
Now you're bringing me back to the unacknowledged movie that Stephen Greer had, and that is he mentions Carl Sagan. Now Carl Sagan did have some interest in possible visitation early on. There's an article I have on my website somewhere that he wrote in his younger years. But according to Stephen Greer in that movie, he says that he was blackmailed and threatened to never talk about UFOs. And I want to know, where's the proof of that? I want to know where Stephen Greer got that.
Yeah, the only thing that I know from following the whole Sagan saga is that he was very pro-UFO, and then he totally discounted it. So something changed his mind. He kind of did the opposite of Hynek, but he did have he was very open. He talked about it, and then towards the end, he was really negative. He was very dismissive. So I don't know if what Dr. Greer said is true, but maybe somebody said, look, you're a high-profile guy. You got to tone this down or at least start to, just like some of the guys that supposedly were in Majestic 12 that were big debunkers, and it turns out they maybe had this secret life, or some of these guys did have an interest in the subject, but in public would just trash it tremendously. And Carl Sagan did a flip, so who knows what that was. As a high-profile guy, it's like, Neil Tyson, if he came out and started talking about UFOs being real, what would be the ramifications? So maybe somebody just nudged him a little bit and said, hey, tone it down or stop talking about it. But
I think
once again, it's a story.
Yeah, I think that's highly likely.
Yeah.
What you're saying is seems like it makes the most sense of it all.
Yeah, because he did change his tune. You just have to wonder why. It's not like he got definitive proof that it wasn't true, because the more you dig, just like what happened to Hynek after Socorro and I think the swamp gas case, he started going, well, this is just, it's very fascinating. There's something to this. And so in the really good cases, there's something that's very elusive, but it keeps you going because it's very strange, and maybe there's circumstantial evidence or radioactivity or whatever the case may be that makes you go, that's a very unusual event, and the fact that X number of people saw it and there's this evidence left behind, then you have these things that kind of, like I said, they're very strange, very peculiar, but trying to get a grasp on what's going on has been the crux of ufology ever since we first started doing this.
I know you're familiar with the site, The Angry UFOlogist.
Yep.
And because you and I are both members on their Facebook page. That's the reason I know. But anyway, someone in the chat room brought this up, and I know he has an article about it, and that is someone wanted us to talk about the Black Knight satellite. Have you followed any of that?
As far as I can tell, the Black Knight satellite is actually a heat shield that came off that's been definitely, there is a timeline that shows that this heat shield, this thermal type blanket came off and is in space, and it looks really strange, but it's It's because of the material and the way it's photographed. I think that there is no Black Knight satellite. I think it is some type of debris, like a thermal heat shield from one of the launches. Because depending on whatever altitude, Earth-based telescopes would be able to zoom in on that thing. And the fact that they keep showing up in NASA images, they're not trying to hide it. I mean, the thing has been floating around for a while. I think it's what they said it was, a thermal heat shield.
Well, there's a crazy amount of, there's about 500,000 pieces of space junk out there, just orbiting our Earth, which is pretty dangerous for UFOs to come in, Yeah,
I think they have pretty good shields. If you follow the USOs, the underwater submerged objects, the water doesn't seem to affect them at all. So if they're, and that's part of the propulsion. I think they surround themselves with some type of static shell or shield that enables them to pass through anything without any resistance.
One of the things that always baffles me about these people that witness a UFO just all of a sudden shooting off like really fast is there's no breaking of the sound barrier. Would that also cover that with what you're talking about?
Well, yeah. I mean, from the paper that the gentleman wrote after witnessing Ray's film with the beam ahead, it's been shown in the lab that if you shoot energy, it could be plasma or other type of energy, out in front of a craft, it does push the air out of the way. So then you're traveling through that vacuum. You're not breaking the sound barrier because the air's been pushed away. That's very feasible. And all our craft now, our shuttle and everything, has those long nose cones on it that's shooting energy out in front of it to displace the air so that you have much more efficient travel when you don't have to churn through the atmosphere. But anything that's gotten here from somewhere else would have the ability to have figured all that out. I mean, the one thing that I think several of us agree on that Ray has pointed out is if they're manipulating gravity, which I think that's what they're doing, then they can manipulate time and space. And that would explain a lot of the bizarre behavior, being able to shoot across the sky in less than a second. Well, if they have some type of mini wormhole or something that's enabling them to manipulate gravity, then all these things are possible. It would just be amazing to watch. The energy required to do the stuff they do is there. And we're finding out a lot more about gravitational waves and, the fact that there's no such thing as empty space. You have this quantum fluctuation where particles blink in and out of existence, which we never thought happens before, but there's no such thing as empty space. It's filled with quarks and things that come in existence and go out of existence. And now they're saying that maybe that's how the universe started. There was nothing, but out of nothing always comes something. And so from absolutely nothing, the universe was born, which is hard for humans to get their head around. But it's pretty interesting. The more we learn about quantum physics and physics in general, all these things are possible. We just haven't figured them out yet. But if a civilization is 500 years ahead of us, it's going to look one way. But if it's 5,000, 500,000 years ahead of us, it's going to look like magic. It's going to be something that even if one crashed in the desert in 1947 and we broke it apart, we still probably wouldn't know what the heck it was or how it worked.
All right, I've been getting in the chat room, people are a little disappointed that we're not going into more controversy.
Okay.
They came here for it.
Well, the angry ufologists and people, there's some good points made about, where's the science? And the science is not being done in a lot of cases. A lot of the sensational stuff that's up on social media now is sensational. It doesn't have any proof. It doesn't have any evidence, but it sounds great. Hey, we had a 3-fingered alien from Peru. Sure you do. It's the kind of thing that people want to be real, want to have that tangible evidence, but when you dig into stories like that, man, it all falls apart. It's just...
What is the status?
I've gotten a lot of grief about that.
Yeah, what is the status of that? I haven't heard anything about it lately.
From what I've seen is, and the first thing I asked Ray about it, and he said, well, that culture didn't use plaster in that time frame. He knew that right away. And that's come up. And the fact that the hand is missing certain bones, it wouldn't even function the way the x-rays show. Another guy pointed out that in 1997, one of these same mummies was presented with its head up, and the new mummy is the same one, but its head is down. He said probably in shame for being presented as an alien. But it's even the real scientists there said it's theft, it's graveyard theft. You've taken bones that are going to carbon date to that right time frame, but you've taken graves and you've reconstructed bones in such a way to make it look anomalous, and then you covered it in plaster to muddy everything else up. Everything I've seen from that case, because the scientists and doctors that those guys were promoting, I looked into the colleges and the scientific institutions, and none of them existed. I couldn't find anything on Google for half these scientists. I couldn't even find them. But the real people that are the real scientists in Nazca, that are the archaeologists and all, they are saying that it's grave robbery. There's nothing true about it. So I haven't seen one shred of evidence out of this whole thing that shows me that it's nothing but cobbled together bones from the poor people whose graves have been taken out. It just, from day one, I didn't believe it, and I still don't believe it. And there's nothing that's come out that shows me there's anything anomalous about it. But hey, for $50, maybe you can watch all the videos. It's just another. Hopefully, not a Roswell slide fiasco again.
Yeah. Well, there's something I read about it. They're saying it's not plaster. It's some type of oxidation that happens naturally in the dry area where they're from and all that.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
Yeah.
It's too uniform.
I had mentioned in the beginning, if it was indeed plaster, being in the field that I'm in, if plaster's like 90, 100 years old, it yellows. It darkens, and there's a patina that becomes like a smooth patina and yellows. That's what happens to plaster.
Right. So this could have been plastered recently.
It sure looked like it. If it was plaster and not this other substance they were talking about. But so that seemed like it might be another money scheme. Also, I've read somewhere where they played these type of games with bodies way back. Like several hundred years ago or 100 years ago or something like that. They would exhume and do something with them and put them back, which I think is really bizarre. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, there's if you go back in time, people used to think they would find thigh bones from giants, and it was dinosaur bones. So people have all kinds of that. Then you had I can't remember the something man with supposedly an unearthed giant that turned out to be a statue. So and it's just, the whole thing just, it smells, it just smells bad. That's the best way I can put it without getting to, it messes everything else up. Once they'll find out that it's all not real and it's fake, it's just another blow to ufology. So, it seems like really good researchers have to separate themselves, do the science. You just can't get on board with any of these things, especially if they're remote events. There's no way to tell if they're real. The Roswell slide, when that came out, I asked Tom Carey if I could look at the slide. I would help him release it. And if I'd gotten a look at it, I probably could have at least satisfied myself, because a cursory look at that picture shows you that it's nothing special. But this is the way it is. People jump on the bandwagon, promote something, want to be the first person to get out the true alien or a piece of metal from a craft or whatever. But, it's just, most of it is a hoax. Most of it is for the money. Most of it is for, the bells and whistles that come with being out in the public, maybe famous for a while, your 15 minutes of fame. It's just not, as I've said before, if you get into ufology, be rich and famous, you're going to be poor and unknown, because it doesn't pay you. It's a passion that we have trying to find the truth, because it's all out of pocket. I mean, the shows we do are great, but, it's a free trip basically for us, and it gives us exposure. It lets us talk. We're on NASA's Unexplained Files too, but that show just vanished. I don't know what happened to that show. It showed about 3 episodes and then disappeared from TV, because we had some really good discussions on that one. But it's good that we have podcasts like this to kind of dig down and talk about stuff, because I can feel the hate mail coming now, man.
Yeah, I see at least one thumbs down to the show so far.
Okay.
Which isn't too bad. So, yeah, here's a good point right here. You just said that for these shows, you actually don't get paid. You just get like free expenses and travel. Is that really what it boils down to?
There's a little bit of a kind of a base sum that's very nominal. You end up spending it for food and usually alcohol, but it's usually a trip. We were going to speak at an event later this year, but it turned out they didn't have good funds, and I just couldn't afford to fly out to do it, and so we kind of had to back out of that one, which is unfortunate. I think it's going to be a good event out in Wyoming, but we're going to be on the Mufon cruise in January with Stanton and Kathleen Martin, which is going to be good. It's good to get like-minded people away from everything, on a boat. The good thing is you're on a boat, you're away from everybody. The bad thing is you're on a boat and you're stuck with everybody in case you don't like your crewmates. But, it's just everybody has their own opinion, and I guess the best thing I can say is, have a good idea of what you're presenting and you're talking about before you throw it out there. Because if you throw something out there and it turns out to be 100% wrong, then your credibility is probably shot at that point. And there's certain people that we don't even have to mention that, when you hear something from them, you're like, oh gosh, not that guy again.
Someone is asking what your thoughts are on Tom DeLonge, and I guess we could cover that lightly if you'd like to.
I don't know, Tom. I think he's trying to do the right thing, but I've seen promises of revelations that haven't come out. There's been a couple of books of fiction. I really don't know the guy, so I can't really say. I think he's trying to do and use the money that he has to find out things, but once again, he could be, he's gotten these interviews and he's talked to people, but they could be feeding him disinformation. They could be doing the same thing that Doty did with Linda Moulton Howe, and he could be going down the same path again because he's kind of new to the field. He might be a little trusting, and somebody can jump on that and go, I'm going to take this guy down the rabbit hole again, just like we did with the MJ12 papers. So I think his heart's in the right place. I think, money helps to get things done, but I don't know how much he's actually researching and digging in.
Right.
So it seems like a nice guy. Seems like a good guy.
Yeah. Corey Good. Someone wanted to know what your thoughts were on Corey Good. Now, wasn't he at the symposium?
Yeah, I just, he seemed like a nice guy. He seemed well-spoken. I talked to a lot of the guys there that were talking about the secret space program. Well-spoken guys. Some of them have multiple PhDs. It's just that the things they're talking about cannot be verified in any way, shape, or form. The only verification is from the other people that say they were part of the secret space program also. I haven't really seen documentation. If we were going to Mars multiple times, there's so many astronomers that, watch the moon landing. I think they'd be able to track a craft that was heading out towards Mars, or at least see it on the way. I just don't think the technology is there. I think those are good stories, but I don't see any way to back them up. I don't see any way to prove that actually happened. A lot of the content is just with age regression and dinosaurs on Mars, and Ross Perot was part of the jump team. Barack Obama, under a different name, was part of the jump team, and they were talking to Howard Hughes, who's, for all I know, has been dead for 20 or 30 years. So when these events happen, but I don't attack the people because I think they're, a lot of them are good people, but the message or the story they're telling, there's no way to back it up. There's no way to verify it. So it's just a tale. That's all it is. It's like sitting around a campfire and telling ghost stories and horror stories.
Right. Someone says if we're taking calls if someone wants to call in and ask a question, or just say a topic that you want us to discuss. As far if you think it's controversial, that number 603-967-4030. We already have someone threatening to call in and crush you.
Bring it.
Yeah, bring it on. Okay. There's someone wondered. bring up a topic about Art Bell and Molten Howell, Richard Hoagland, remote viewing. I don't know if that's really a topic, would really, I know Art is retired now.
Yeah, and Linda is still out there talking. Richard Hoagland still got his Enterprise mission site. Remote viewing, I talked to Joe McConigal, the #1 remote viewer. I've actually had it successfully work for me. I loathe the techniques. I've done the Monroe hemisync tapes, which give you that 2 tones in each ear combined into 1 tone. It makes you have out-of-body experiences and a little bit of lucid dreaming. But I believe remote viewing is a real thing that worked. The government spent $25 million on it.
Yeah,
you ever seen? Go ahead.
Hang on just a minute, if you would. We have a caller. Caller, thanks so much for calling in, and please give your... the computer's not taking him. Something's happening here. And sorry to interrupt you. Caller, right. Can you hear me? Caller, can you hear me? Okay, we may be having an issue with this. It's a joined call, but how about you, Ben? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, because the screen's kind of gone blank here. All right.
Yeah, I'm getting the spool.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. Yeah. All right, so we'll continue on. I guess I'll try to hang that up, or, I better not try anything, because anything could happen at this point. So you can go ahead and continue on if you know what you were talking before.
I was just going to say, if you ever get the special version of The Men Who Stare at Goats with George Clooney, Stubblebine and a lot of the remote viewing guys have some really interesting clips at the end of that, where she basically says, 90% of that movie is actually true. But I've read all the books. I've seen all the studies. I think remote viewing is just a way that your perceptions can leave your body and witness things in time and space. If we're all from a big bang or from one single source, then maybe we're all still connected in a way that supersedes speed of light, and it's like the quantum entanglement. You can have an event on the other side of the universe that happens, and there's a reaction on this side of the universe instantaneously, and that's been proven. There's been studies about that. So it's I wouldn't discount it. ESP and things like that are probably just a function of the mind and the psyche that we just haven't discovered yet. I don't think they're paranormal. They're just something that we can do that we haven't really tapped into yet because we're too busy living in the material world. Yeah,
I had the other show I do, the Everything Else show. I had Edwin C. May on, who was involved in the Stargate project, and remote viewing and all that. Very, very. It is fascinating.
Yeah, grill flame. It's McConigal is still. I think he married Robert Monroe's wife. Robert Monroe passed away at the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia. But that's where they sent these guys to train using that hemisync technique to kind of get in the a deprivation mode where you're not feeling. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't remember that, but your eyes are covered, your ears are covered, you don't feel anything, and then I think they used to do tanks of water back in the day, but
saline water. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you get into that mode without you'll have some strange experiences when you don't have any input. Your brain will start creating input, or something else happens altogether. It's one of those things that if you haven't tried it, give it a try. It's very interesting. I mean, you can calm your mind and experience this kind of flow where in sports we call it being in the zone, where you're not thinking about anything. If you, like I play tennis, and if I'm hitting really well and I'm not thinking about it, it continues. But as soon as I think, man, I'm hitting the ball great, I'm out of the zone, and then I'm making mistakes.
I did remote viewing successfully on a live radio show, which was kind of fun. I mean, I just kind of gave the first thing that I thought of, and ended up being close.
Yeah.
So it was what the host of the radio show, he had something on his desk, and he said, describe it. And I said, it looks something like a turtle. And he said, yes, it's a hard hat. So, hey, I'm able to do that now.
Close.
Yeah, close enough. Yeah. So as far as the future of ufology, where do you think it's headed? We have technology coming in, and it's a double-edged sword because you have CGI, but you also have different ways to detect UFOs and film UFOs and all that. So what do you think the future is going to be of ufology?
It's going to be what Ray did in the 70s that's coming around again, but it's not new. It's the instrumented study of UFOs. You need a magnetometer, gravimeter. You need the devices that record magnetic waves, electromagnetic frequencies, EMP. You need all the things that will give you more data than just footage. And, filming more in the daytime, catching these things with other devices so you can, if they change directions, you have a reading on the magnetometer that spikes showing, that something happened. There's something going on with propulsion. It's somehow manipulating the magnetic waves or space itself. That's where any kind of answers are going to come from, not from just, footage of something or lights in the sky. You need instrument studies, you need high-end cameras, high-speed cameras, and we need to do this in the daytime. Don't go out at night. That's where you don't get that much data. Anything at night is going to look strange if that's what you're looking for. It's the daytime footage, and our cell phones have a lot of this on it. It just doesn't have a great range, but most of them have electromagnetic sensors. There's about 7 or 8 sensors in your phone. They'll do a lot of cool things. Give you azimuth, give you the flight trader program, which tells you what's flying in the sky, whether it's an airplane or satellite. Those are all tools that we keep on our phones. So I think that the future of ufology is scientifically using instruments to study these phenomena with better equipment, better tech. Let's use it and go out and see what we can catch. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to catch our own data so that we can present evidence that we've caught ourselves. We don't have to start out with the fact that we have to, first of all, prove it's not a hoax or CGI or whatever when somebody else submits something like that. So I think the future is, doing this more scientifically and getting to the truth that way instead of this kind of sensationalistic way that ufology has gone in the last 10 years.
Right. Yeah, it's really anyone's guess as far as, the people that'll be, taking our places over the years, not necessarily someone doing a show, but someone doing the work you're doing. It's hard to say where that's going to go.
Yeah, we need younger people, definitely, and I think that the way to attract them is to have more, when Tom Carey and Mr. Schmidt were at the American University where he had first announced the Roswell picture, but, that was a free event that Tony and I were at, and the place was packed. I think it held about 150 people, but it was all students. And they were fascinated, and that's the kind of things we need to do. I know that paying for some of these events, you have to charge to pay for your expenses. But I've been trying to dig into having a presentation at American University and places like that. Maybe some courses in school, something to get the younger generations involved in it, because a lot of the guys that have been in this field a long time are fading away, and it's a shame because there's not a whole lot of youth in this, and we definitely need younger, smarter people looking into this in a way that they don't have a bias. You just can't start out believing one way or the other. You got to have an open mind and let the science take you where it's going to take you.
The only thing that young people are getting more involved in as far as conferences and things like that is like Comic-Cons and things like that. But I talk to people across the board in all different types of conferences and things that people are involved in, and they say the same thing. There's not enough young people involved. Yeah,
and I don't know what because when I was young, I was fascinated with things like this, but there was no avenue. You couldn't become an investigator. There was nothing to do. I wasn't even aware of NICAP or any of the CUFOS or anything back in the day. But I think it all starts with, when you're in school. If there's one class that just maybe talks about phenomena or anomalous, something that gets your interest, because that's where you're going to catch people. Look how many people became scientists because of Star Trek.
Right.
I mean, I see guys on TV, I saw Star Trek, and I thought, man, I want to study the planets, and I want to do that, and then they became scientists. And I'm sure people did that because of Star Wars and whatever, I'm older, so I'm referencing really old stuff. But sometimes media, TV, and now the vast amount of media we have bombarded at us, sometimes that's how, you get caught, but and get wrapped up into it where you want to actually spend some time doing it and studying it. But it's tough, you have to have that kind of interest in the unusual to begin with. Same with, paranormal or ghost hunters. You got to, be interested in it, think there might be something to it, not be scared to walk into a dark building. It's just, it takes time, and it certainly takes money to do these investigations. So you got to really want to do it. It's not going to pay you for sure.
Right. I think part of the problem with young people not getting involved is that there's so much information coming in so many different avenues to choose from. And, a lot of it's, from your computer. It's not.
Yeah. I'm so glad I didn't grow up in this type of environment, because when I was growing up, the computer would fill a room and you had a punch card. But I was always out, playing sports, hiking.
Right.
I went to school up in the mountains of Virginia before I went to the University of Richmond. But I was always out, man. I couldn't sit in. I didn't watch TV in my 20s, 30s. I watched way too much now, but I didn't watch TV. I always wanted to be out. When I was in college, it was usually at a bar. But I always was out playing basketball or playing tennis or hiking. I couldn't sit inside and be on a computer and play games all day.
Right.
It's just not, it baffles me that people do that.
Yeah. Well, to each his own, I guess. Now, someone asked in the chat room, what is your best guess as to the cause of the phenomena of UFOs?
I would say that there's some type of technology that's interacting with our planet. I don't know what they are or where they're from. I've always said before, it could be ET, interdimensional time travelers, interdimensional time traveling aliens. It could be some type of, Freud would say, some type of overmind that's creating, if enough people will it hard enough, it'll appear. But, it seems like there is evidence that there is a advanced technology that does fly in our atmosphere. And I've seen evidence of that on really good footage, some good pictures, some good evidential stories along with some evidence. But it's been happening a long time. I mean, and even Peter the Great in his journals talked about burning shields traversing the sky. And those guys were pretty good at describing things, and the burning shield crossing the sky sure sounds like a UFO to me, maybe a disc-shaped UFO. But these things have been happening for a long time, and I think that it's part of our culture, it's part of our history, and I think that it has an element that is not earthbound. It's the best way to say it.
Right. One of the controversial subjects that comes up once in a while, and I wondered what you thought of the whole story, is Bob Lazar.
Yeah, Bob, I saw when he finally gave his interview to George Knapp in, can't remember, we were in California where we were. I think it was California. But there's two sides of that. The orange material, element 115, didn't pan out the way that he said. We've only been able to produce like a trillionth of a dot of that stuff. The one thing that I remember is that George Knapp did, and this has happened with other people, like the gentleman that filmed the UFO shooting that missile down when he was, tracking the missile, is that the military will go back and try to erase you from their records and say, look, you were never in the Army, you were in the Navy. With Lazar, Mr. Knapp did find that he was in the book, the directory of that area S1 and S2 where he worked, Area 51. So he was there, even though the government said he wasn't there. So that's kind of a red flag that they're lying. He was there. It's just I don't know what he did. To say that he and another guy were sitting there trying to figure out how this machine worked, and they would just check in and go, "Have you made any progress?" And in his speech, he said they would just say stuff, but they hadn't made any progress because they couldn't figure out how the thing worked. It just seems a little ludicrous. It seems like, if you had a crash saucer you were trying to reverse engineer, you'd have about 40 scientists maybe 100 scientists each working on a separate part of it so that they're not talking to each other. They compartmentalize everything. And then you try to put the story together afterwards. I don't think you'd have a couple of guys working on trying to figure out propulsion, especially a guy that really doesn't have the degrees in the background, although, he seems like a smart guy, a physicist. He built rocket engine cars, but still, I don't know if that qualifies you to be called into Area 51 to work on reverse engineering an alien spacecraft. So it's one of those things where the guy seems like an honest guy, nice guy, but I can't tell if it's truthful or not. The one thing that I pointed out is that he did work at that base when they said he didn't. So take it with a grain of salt.
What base was that? You mean
he was out on air? He was at Nellis Air Force Base because he showed up in the directory and he actually produced a W-2 stub that showed he was getting paid by can't remember the name of that company that hires the people. It's a top secret company that flies them out on those Janet blacked out window jets. Huh. I can't remember the name of it, but they filmed the building. It was on TV.
Wow.
So he was getting paychecks. Yeah, he was getting paychecks from that organization that did hire the people that go out to that base and fly on those airplanes. So, and then he did bring, I think it was John Lear out there at that time that
they filmed sighting.
Those. Yeah, they filmed those flights, and I remember one guy said it was a kite, but where they were filming was top secret area. I don't think anybody would be out there flying a kite.
I don't think so. Yeah.
And there are some weird things that are filmed out there, but could be just advanced technology that we have that just looks weird. But it's a great story, but there's not much to back it up. He did work out there. He did get paid from there, but what he saw and did is still a story.
Right. Scott in the chat wants to know, what exactly do you consider lore versus fact in ufology? Let me say that again. What do you consider lore versus fact in ufology?
Well, it depends on where you think ufology started. I kind of go with the Kenneth Arnold sighting, even though there was a lot of things going on before that. But, Kenneth Arnold either did or didn't spot these things skipping through the air. What I found interesting, and it's part of the lore, the legend, is that they were wedge-shaped, which is very interesting because it's not like he said they're saucer-shaped, which everybody was calling them saucers at the time. This first early sighting was of wedge-shaped craft flying out there near Mount Rainier. I think that some of these early cases, Roswell, who knows what happened there, but they certainly have lied about it a lot. There's a kernel of truth to a lot of things that are part of ufology, and the lore and the legend, and there's all these things around the edges that you're kind of like, was Colonel Corso really saying this, or does he think this happened, or did this really happen? And so I think the ufology, the fact is everything you can verify, the really good footage. There's some great footage from the 40s and 50s that show some very strange things way before CGI and the ability. There still was the ability to hoax, but when you're talking about 8mm, 16mm film, that's pretty hard to fake. It's pretty easy to see if you've tampered with that emulsion type film. So one thing that we've always liked to do is apply new technology to old film, old pictures. Sometimes you can pull out data that a hoaxer wouldn't have thought at the time. And so I think that separating lore from fact and from fiction is a matter of reading, doing the research, looking at some of the video, understanding how why something might be real, why something is just a story. You have to have a scientific method. You have to be able to repeat something, and it's really hard to do in this. So you have to go for the next best thing. What kind of evidence was left over? How many witnesses were there? Is it a single witness? Is it reported anonymously? There's a lot of red flags that come up with certain types of cases. And then there's some that, like whatever happened to Fatima. Well, if 100,000 people witnessed that, I'm pretty sure they didn't make it up. Something happened. I couldn't say what, but that was a phenomenon. And whether it was a miracle or whatever, I have no idea. But there was something that happened there. I would have loved to have been there. So it's tough. It's one of those things where a lot of people that never believe in UFOs, and then they have a sighting, they're like, I saw something I couldn't explain, and it was totally outside of anything I've ever thought could actually fly in the sky. And they go from being a diehard skeptic to believing something because they had a personal experience with it. So until you have kind of a personal experience, which most of us have had at least once, it's hard to go off of other people's stories or even their evidence if you weren't there yourself. You have to make a leap of faith there.
Yeah. I'm sorry, our Skype screen is still frozen, and I hope that caller's still not just sitting there online. So we're not able to take any calls unless I want to start Skype over again. I'm not sure how that happened, but we have a question up on the chat room by RD1066, and which brings me to our guest next week. We have David Halpern. He's going to be talking about the connection of religions and UFOs. So the question in the chat room is, he wants to know if you think the world's religions are based on ET visitations.
The Bible could be, and I'm sure I'll get some grief for this, it could be a volume of people trying to explain contact with an advanced civilization. It sure seems like parts of it are. The Bible does talk about non-humans and the Nephilim and things like that. I don't know, if what we believed were gods turned out to be ETs or something. I can see that if advanced technology came to a very old culture and, came down in flying ships with gear on and things like that, and flashlights and lasers and communications and speakers, then you might consider them a god. I just, it's one of those things where I think there's a religion should be based on the fellowship of man, and there's a lot in religion that isn't. Almost all of our wars have been fought regarding religion. So I think that the purpose of religion is to kind of make us humble and work together, and that you'll never be able to figure out, I don't think, if a lot of what the Bible says has come from, witnessing like something else coming here and you think it's a god. It's just hard to differentiate. And the Bible, when you really dig into the chapters that were left out, the chapters that were put in, the chapters that were removed that gave power to women, and all the books that were taken out of the Bible, it just seems like it was manipulated through time. And history is written by the winners, so who knows how many stories are missing, how much is not there. It's just hard to say. I think that's a possibility, but I couldn't say for sure. I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself religious. I have my certain beliefs, but I don't know about that one. It's tough. It could be. It might not be. So.
Right. Let's see. In the forum, we sort of went over this before, but there was a question up there. And do you think that the interest in ufology will dwindle in the future unless there is another big event, for example, another Roswell or Phoenix Lights case?
I think there's always a big event. If there is none, it'll be manufactured. I think that as we get better and better with our telescopes and our probes to other planets, that once NASA admits that there was probably life on Mars, and it seems like there was life on Mars, then you have a whole shift. You're going to have a paradigm shift, because all the people don't believe there's life anywhere else except here. If there was life on Mars, then again, mathematically, you've got probably 100 million civilizations, at least in our galaxy. And there's, 2 trillion galaxies out there. So I think that as more technology, more media, a lot of the movies, a lot of the TV shows, I think the interest will always be there. It's just a matter of whether we move in the right direction and we start, doing the scientific study of UFOs with instruments, and stop, with the conjectures and promoting hoaxes and, just going down these paths that lead us nowhere. If you just go out, try to capture some of this data with good instrumentation and present it in a way that people can understand and can be scientifically verified, then there should be a lot of interest in it. If it's for sensationalism and all this other stuff, that could keep it alive also. I just think that probably an announcement of life on Mars would be the next really big event, and or Europa or wherever we may find it. It seems like there's evidence, there's organic material that seems to have come from comets, and that whole Panspermia type of theory that, life is spread through comets, bacteria, hitting the atmosphere, raining down, and then you've got life. There was that interesting case in India with the red rain, and, that's never really been explained. They had this red rain come down that had no nucleus, but it was cells that multiplied. And I looked at this recently because there was a show on TV about it, and they still haven't figured out what it is. All these biologists don't know what the heck the cells are. And it made me think, what if the bubonic plague and these great diseases that have wiped out a good portion of humanity were just, some comet hit the atmosphere right over London at that time. It released this bacteria from another planet that became the bubonic plague, and it took the human race a while to build an immunity to it so that it didn't wipe us out completely. We're pretty good with things like that, but there's a lot of weird viruses that pop up out of nowhere. Who knows where they actually come from? And they can be very devastating until we kind of build the antibodies to combat it.
Yeah, I always wonder where things, all of a sudden, what is the origin of some of the things that happen? Even a cold, or a certain type of flu. The origins are kind of a mystery. Next controversial topic is disclosure. And maybe like the disclosure project. And, Stephen Greer has a new, I don't know how new it is, but it's a GoFundMe campaign, which is looking to raise $50,000 toward UFO disclosure. What do you think about all that?
There will never be disclosure. I really, there's two sides of this. If there's really, they don't know much of anything, they're not going to come out and say that. If, on the other hand, there's been, abductions, crashes, pilots perishing, chasing these things, or getting zapped by these things, they're not going to come out and say, look, we've been lying to you for about 60 years. We did get a lot of really good tech out of this that we seeded to certain companies that made billions of dollars. We did have some deaths or some people being abducted, but hey, don't worry about it. Everything's under control. They're here. Life goes on. There's no scenario I can see where the government is going to have a reason for disclosure. I just don't see it, unless we have some type of invasion, which is a whole nother scenario. But I don't think there's any reason for disclosure. I think that also if disclosure would reveal some tech or some advances that we have over some of our enemies, that wouldn't be a good thing either. I wouldn't want to release top secret information that could compromise the United States. So I don't see any reason for disclosure. I don't see it happening. I think that, people are trying to have that happen, but there's no compelling reason. There's no way to force the government to do that. They're certainly not going to come back and go, oh, we've been telling you a bunch of crap for a long time. We're going to own up to it now. There's no scenario, no situation where I see disclosure happening. Right. Unless it's forced, unless it's completely forced.
Someone made a funny point in the message board saying, $50,000, that's all it's going to cost for a disclosure.
Or, another addition to the house.
Yeah, right. Well, actually, Steve Bassett, he was my very first guest. I contacted all these different people in the ufology, and Steve Bassett right away said, yeah, sure, yeah. So, but anyway, so for that, I do appreciate that, but I agree with you. I think even if there was some type of an invasion, there still wouldn't be any reason for the government to say that something was going on ahead of time.
Right. You know what would happen if the government came out and said, yeah, we are being visited by ET, then the first thing would happen would people get on social media and go, yep, they made that up. That's a lie. Uh-huh. So you could probably tell the truth and nobody would believe it.
Right. Yeah, I think, I don't think disclosure will come through the government. I think, perhaps, it'll come through knowledge, only like you said, an invasion or some type of massive sighting where that just can't be discounted, and it seems like things like the Phoenix Lights and, other, witnessed accounts would have changed things, but they don't. So you just wonder how much of a major sighting it has to be.
Yeah, unless you have a UFO crash at the MUFON Symposium where you all get a piece of it. I just don't see any scenario where that's feasible, logical, or is something that somebody would be willing to do.
Right. I asked Seth Shostak from SETI, I said, what type of evidence do you need about a UFO, UFOs visiting us? And he said he wanted a wing of the Smithsonian full of debris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen him talk about that. Yeah. And he's got a point, I mean, there's a lot of grandiose claims out there, but man, if we could only have a piece, I finished reading the UFO crash at Aztec and all this debris that was found out there, and I'm just wondering, if all this debris is found and it's got these unusual properties, why isn't this being analyzed? And I remember Linda Moulton Howe taking those pieces that were mailed to her to MIT and all these labs, and they couldn't figure out what this, was this magnesium with bismuth layers manufactured, but had all these weird properties. It seems like in what I've seen, there has been evidence of exotic materials, but nothing ever comes of it. So I guess it's very hard. It's very hard to prove something is extraterrestrial, because if it's manufactured and it's using isotopes from Earth, there's nothing unusual about the metals or the way they're combined, then the onus is on the person producing that material to show that's ET, and that's almost impossible to do unless the thing is made of some metal we've never heard of, or like what happened to Socorro, where the metal and the rock was combined in a way that didn't conform to any periodic chart on Earth. Then you have something. But until that day happens, I don't know. Even if you had a piece of a spaceship, where would you take it? Who would you trust with it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what could you find out? And then if you release that info, people probably not going to believe you anyway.
Yeah, as far as we know, there's just so many elements, and so that could be, like you say, compound in certain ways. But yeah, it would be really tough to actually prove that physical evidence was physical evidence, I think.
Yeah, because all our heavy metals are produced by supernovas, so that's where you get your platinum, your gold, and everything. And the fact that it's abundant in the universe, or maybe not as abundant, you have to have a supernova to produce some of these heavy elements. But it just seems like it would have to be combined in a way or structured in a way that's way beyond anything that we know about. And there's still a lot of data points you'd have to come up with to prove that it was not manufactured on Earth, that it was part of a flying craft, that it has unusual properties. It's just tough. I mean, what would disclosure look like? Yeah, I can't even foresee it. I have no idea how that would actually work. So, it's and you have the conundrum of any scientist, metallurgist, or whatever that would examine something like this. They're not going to come out and go, wow, this is off-world UFO material, because it'll jeopardize their position in their college or their job or whatever. So, when we get material, you have to do the smart thing and let labs analyze it without mentioning anything about where it came from, what it's attached to. Just try to get some data. Don't ever mention it's from a UFO or a landing site or whatever. Just try to have them analyze it with absolutely no prejudice at all, because first of all, if you say it's from a UFO and it turns out to have unusual properties, then they'll take it and they'll classify it and you'll never see it again. And that's what happened to the metal at Socorro from the rock. It was
tell that story. Tell that story in general, if you would.
Ray and Lonnie and Dr. Hynek were standing at the landing site in Socorro over the 1964 incident, and Lonnie looks down and says, "Oh, there's a rock in this in one of the landing pads the 4 landing gear hit." And Lonnie said something like that. Looks like that rock was broken in half by one of the landing pads. And Dr. Hynek looked down and said, "Sure does, doesn't it?" And then they didn't do anything, and Ray realized that they were going to not do anything, and so he reminded them that they had to go back and do the press conference back in Socorro, and then he went back, got in his car, drove back out, grabbed this rock. The rock had the landing gear had scraped down the rock and rolled up some metal in it. Ray eventually got it to Dr. Frankel at Goddard in Maryland, I believe. And he came back and said that it was aluminum and I think some common elements, but the way it was combined didn't conform to anything on the periodic chart for Russia or United States or any other country. And this was like probably in the 70s. And that he would, write a paper about it. And of course, that's when he kind of vanished from the scene. The rock was given back to Ray with all the metal taken out of it, and no more was heard about that. But the initial report was that the combination of these metals was not anything that conformed to earth-based manufacturing or smelting or anything like that. And that's when it obviously became classified. The material was taken. They were told never to talk about it again, and that's exactly what happened.
Right, right. Someone mentioned Daryl Sims, the alien killer, up on the message board.
I know Daryl.
Yeah, Daryl's a nice guy, and he's actually in trouble. He's in the Houston area right now.
Yeah, he's underwater, and Daryl is a really nice guy. He's one of the good guys. He's unfortunately going through a tough time right now. He's in Houston. The recent post that I saw was they're okay, but it was very dicey for a while there. I feel so bad for all those people because the water is like wind, man. When it's really a lot of it, there's nothing you can do. There's no way to combat it. Water will get everywhere. It devastates lives. It's just it's bad. It's bad. I've lived through several hurricanes, and there's no preparing for something like that. I'm surprised they didn't evacuate the whole area, but I don't think they knew it was going to be as bad as it was. But Daryl, I like Daryl. He's a good guy. It's like Richard Dolan. I saw Richard, at Nevada, at Las Vegas at the conference, and he was distancing himself from some of the speakers, but he's very cordial. He's a smart guy. He has good points, and he seems sincere. And there's few and far between in this business where people are sincere and don't try to take things from other people and present it as their own or stab people in the back. But everybody that's in this field knows the good guys and some of the bad guys, I guess. Yeah.
What some people, along the controversial side, some people say there's a lot of infighting in the UFO field. What do you make of why that happens?
I think in some cases it's ego. Somebody wants to be on top. Somebody wants to be the presenter of all the new material. Somebody might find out that somebody else has got something, then they make it their own. And you might be friends with somebody, and then you present something, and they call BS on you, and then you're not friends anymore. Then you're trashing each other. The one thing I noticed at the conference was a lot of people came up and talked to me about other people, and I try to stay out of any type of personal attacks or anything like that, especially if I don't know someone. But there's a lot of animosity. People were had animosity towards Tony and I when we got on Hangar One, and that's nothing I can control, but it seems like a lot of the infighting is because somebody wants to be the leader. Somebody wants to be the guy that brings this to, brings out the good material. Somebody wants to generate the money and be in control of that. Somebody wants to control the information. I just don't think that if we're all trying to work together, there's not a way that we can't kind of get along. But, people have different views. If somebody's really into abductions, they're going to investigate that way. If somebody believes there are demons or angels, they're going to believe that and not believe anybody else. And then if you have a strong belief and people disagree with you, then you're going to trash them on social media, and then you're going to, get all this infighting going. And we're wasting time. It's kind of like Game of Thrones. You've been watching that. We shouldn't be fighting each other because there's a much bigger battle coming down the road.
Yeah. Do you think that you're saying people should work together, but when you're like investigating cases, how involved, I'm talking about through Mufon, how involved does that get with other people, like networking?
Well, if you have a case that's similar to other cases, you reach out to other investigators. The investigators are good in Mufon at sharing data. People, there's sometimes there are power plays in each state, being the state director or whatever. But for the most part, I think that people are willing to share data and try to help with cases. it's, whenever I go to a lot of these events, not to listen to the speakers, but to network with the people that I meet there. Like the people from Phoenix MUFON, great group of people, do very good work. I like meeting them every year. I like seeing my friends from Colorado, my friends from Florida. We usually get along. We usually try to help each other. We'll share data. It's just that, as with all of this, we all have jobs, we all have obligations, and it's really hard unless you're doing this full time to do all of the collaborative work that we should be doing. Right.
Someone just asked in the message board, when Stan Friedman is no longer with us, who will be the next Stan Friedman? I actually asked Stan that question when he was on my show. Surprisingly, not necessarily surprisingly, he said John Greenfield. Is it Green? Is that his last name? Greenwald. Yeah. No, he got his name wrong. He thinks John Greenwald would, and I told John that, and he almost went to tears.
Well, there's no replacing Stanton. He's one of the originals. John Greenwald has done a great job with the Black Vault. Kudos to the guy for doing all his Freedom of Information requests and getting a lot of great documents out there. I remember seeing the guy on, it was Unsolved Mysteries or something when he was 14 or 15, and he's just been going at it ever since. I've met him several times. He's a very nice guy, family guy. I like John. I think he does good work. He doesn't really, when he presents the material, he pretty much shows the documents he got. He doesn't really slant it one way or another. You kind of read into it, but he's doing a good job of pulling down information, because with Freedom of Information Act, you got to be very specific. If you put the wrong word in there, say you're looking for documents on UFOs, but they don't call them UFOs, they may call them anomalous aerial objects. You got to put that wording in there to pull that report, and so he's learned how to do this almost to perfection. So, I would say John would be somebody could take up the mantle, but like a lot of these guys, there's the mold was broke when they were made. There'll never be another guy like Stanton, but there's nobody else like John either. I think that's a good analogy, though, that John will do a lot of the work, because Stanton does a lot of archival work. He looks at a lot of documents. He does cross-referencing and tries to find the validity of these things. But hopefully he's got 10, 20 years left with us. Right.
Yeah, he's actually looking good these days. He's lost
weight.
He
lost a lot of weight. Lost weight.
Yeah. And Jacques Vallée, I don't know if anyone would ever be able to replace him as well.
Yeah, Jacques, I never realized how tall he was, because when we met him in Arizona,
no, I couldn't believe it.
I'm 6'2", but he towered over me. But he's done a lot of the, he was one of the critical thinkers from early on. He was talking about the science of things. I've read all his books. Very interesting things that go on in his country, too. Some fascinating cases that a lot of people probably have never heard of. But he was a good thinker. He kind of trying to break it down, looking at the physical aspects, the mental aspects, the ramifications through history of what some of these things are, and kind of how they've evolved over time. But he's one of those types of researchers that there's only one of a kind, and he still looks good for his age. I think he's in his 70s now, but nice guy. We really enjoyed talking to him, and we need more people to fill the shoes of some of these people that are long in the tooth now.
Yeah, that's right. Now, you don't personally have a website, do you?
Yeah, we're at mufonva.com.
Oh, through the Mufon site. Okay.
Yeah.
And have you ever considered writing a book yourself?
Yeah, we've been talking about it.
You and Tony?
Yeah, there's. I know that Kevin Randall, and I don't think this is anything. Well, actually, it's listed. Kevin Randall wrote a book on Socorro, and Tony, me, and Ray all signed some documents saying that he could use some material that we uncovered, because Ray was the original investigator, and you can't do a book on Socorro without talking to Ray. But he's written a book. I'll be interested to see that. But I think there's a kind of a bigger story there that would include all the work that Ray's done that still needs to be written. So, we've talked about that, and maybe writing one about investigations. that's something we definitely want to do. We definitely want to get some things down on paper. We've written a lot of articles. We always write a monthly article that's at www.mufonva.com. So we write articles every month. We've talked about all the topics, the social media attacks, problems with ufology at that site. So that's something that it's trying to find time. And my job, I drive 80 miles a day. Round trip for my job, so by the time I get home, I'm pretty fried if I'm going to hit the gym or play tennis. Mm-hmm. So most of my work for ufology is done on the weekends, although I'm always assigning cases and always doing research. So it's tough, You just got to grind it out, and if you didn't love doing this, it certainly would be a grind. But I'm always fascinated by the stuff we find and the information, and even working on a case from 1964, we're still pulling new evidence, and that's just amazing to me that can happen.
Wow, yeah. Now, just one last question. We're at the end of the show here, just a couple minutes. What do you consider the best case that you've worked on in your area?
I had a case in the Shenandoah area where a family was being traumatized by objects flying really low at night. They had some cattle mutilated on their property, and the son told me that he was even scared. His mom wouldn't even go out at night anymore because the way he said it was things would swoop down on her. Wow. And in the same area, there was a baby that was strapped into a carriage, and this is a less than 1 year old baby that disappeared from a locked, alarmed home. Turned up, police were called, couldn't find it anywhere. Turned up 2 hours later on the neighbor's porch, still strapped into its protective seat or whatever. Wow. I don't have children, so. And this was all in the same area. And there were 3 or 4 reports. So there's something very unusual going on there. And we've always wanted to stake out that area and do a search because it's very mountainous. There's a big valley. And I know from cases that these things seem to like to travel in between down in the valleys where they're not on radar, and they can kind of go back and forth, in stealth. So that was one of the most interesting ones that we had. It was, it involved a supposed abduction, things flying down, a cattle mutilation, and multiple sightings.
Wow, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. Just I would need to spend a week there to try to even begin to figure all that out and get all the witnesses together.
Oh, well, hey Ben, thanks so much.
I appreciate it.
We didn't get really bad, I don't think.
No, I try to be, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. It's just that some things, and, I got to ease up on the Facebook stuff. But sometimes I just can't take it. I got to say something, and it might tee off a few people. But, at least I'm being honest, being real.
Right. All right, Ben, you take care.
Thank you, Martin. Appreciate it.
All right, I'll talk soon.
All right, sir.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. So that's it for the show. Thanks so much for either joining in live or listening as a podcast. And I forgot to announce that we're also on a radio show every week, and I don't have it up in front of me. It's a new radio show. I'll be talking about that next week. And don't forget, or I haven't announced this yet, but next week we are starting an hour earlier. The gentleman, David Halpern, is going to be talking about UFOs and religion, and he's a man early to rise and early to bed, so the best I could get out of him is coming in an hour earlier. It's still going to be a 2-hour show. So next week, show up at 7 o'clock here, and thanks again if you're supporting the show, and thanks for listening and watching online live. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.